and implementation of enterprise and operational technology security architectures, established OT security operations center, and delivered board-level security metrics and executive awareness program. He's deeply influenced with industry frameworks and standards such as the NIST CSF, ISO 27001, NERC, CIP, PCI DSS, iTrust CSF, and ISA IC 62443. Wow, that's a lot. I mean, then currently is the OT security consultant. Wola provides advisory and hands-on leadership for complex OT security initiatives, including network segregation, OT monitoring at scale, data diode implementation, and regulatory compliance programs. Previously, he served as the global practice lead for Siemens Canada, Canada's Critical Infrastructure Defense Center, where he led cybersecurity consulting, managed services, and go-to-market strategy for critical infrastructure clients. Wola also holds a Master's of Science in Information Security and Assurance and is a graduate of the Carnegie Mellon University's Chief Information Security Officer program. I hear that's a good program. I've heard a lot of people jump on that. It maintains extensive industry certifications, including, but not limited to, CISSP, CISM, CSAP, CCSP, GCIP, GRID, GRID. You probably tell us about that because I'm sure it's around utilities and all. And ISAIC 62443 cybersecurity expert. He's a trusted advisor to executives and practitioners alike. Wola brings real-world insights into securing industrial environments while balancing operational resilience, regulatory demands, and business outcomes. Thank you very much, Wola. You're welcome.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, thanks.
Not done that in a while. That was a good exercise. Okay, so let's just jump into it. And one thing that I've noticed, especially lately when we've been talking about cybersecurity of incidents, whether breaches or situations around protecting critical infrastructure, is the need to contextualize. So for example, there's the global landscape and there's the local landscape.
Yeah.
Today, innovation, leveraging technology is making a lot of us look at global. So we're looking at global landscape. But, so you can't help but still always localize it. So, what's your take? The global versus local landscape, so give us give us an overview of critical infrastructure security globally and
Yeah.
what you understand or so far how we've developed in Nigeria or what you see us, how we apply when it comes to critical infrastructure in Nigeria.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. To contextualize it from a global to a local, right? I'll be very careful in using the word global when we talk about critical infrastructure, right? Because what is critical infrastructure actually it's different from each continent and each country. So, but to look at it from a North American perspective, right, and who are always the leaders and stuff like this, the US, for example, or Canada, and to compare it to Nigeria, right? So we'll look at what's actually the definition of critical infrastructure, or what do countries refer to critical infrastructure, and it's very, very interesting. So if you look at it from a Canadian perspective, which is to my audience, where I'm currently, resident at the moment, where I've been for the past 6 to 7 years, critical infrastructure is defined as those processes, services, assets, technology, or network that is essential to the well-being, safety, or economic security of Canadians and the effective functioning of Canadian governments, right? So that is what Canada, Public Safety Canada, has defined as critical infrastructure. So it encompasses a whole lot of things, technology, assets, facilities, location, services, right, and network, right? So what it essentially means is that if there's any compromise of any of this or for a critical infrastructure, right, it puts into jeopardy the safety, the economic well-being of Canadians, and even the effective functioning of the government. So that's it from a Canadian perspective and very similar to what we have in the US. So I'll say that's it from a North American perspective. If you look at it locally from a Nigerian perspective, we don't actually, our definition is a bit different. Ours is critical national information infrastructure, right? Our focus is on computer systems, telecommunications, that provide services to Nigerians that if there is a disruption of any of this infrastructure, telecommunication or computer systems, it can cause jeopardy or serious issues for the effective functioning of the Nigerian government, right? So from a critical infrastructure perspective, in Nigeria, because we are actually not a very industrialized country, our focus is on critical national information, right? We're more focused on information technology as our
Right,
critical
right.
infrastructure than in a North
Mhm.
American perspective where it is all encompassing, right? Because of industrialization and the fact that a lot of what drives the economy of North American countries are the critical infrastructure industries like energy, telecommunication, transportation, health, and stuff like that. We are not a very industrialized country. So our definition of critical information has critical infrastructure has information tied into it. And we're looking at networks, computers, and systems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Right. So does that mean we're still like really, really at the basic level from a critical national infrastructure perspective?
So look at the definition, right? When I mentioned Canada says any assets, services, process, technology, or facilities that
Mm-hmm.
is essential to the well-being, economic well-being, safety, and health of Canadian citizens and the effective functioning
Mm.
of the government, right? So look at utility, right? Uh, Without power here, there will be chaos,
Right.
right? Without power in in North
Mm-hmm.
America, there will be chaos.
Mm-hmm. True.
Without power in Nigeria, we are used to it, right? We've been
No,
functioning.
no, we're achieving a bit of chaos now, but it's not that bad. We're achieving a
I'm
bit of
just
chaos.
trying to contextualize it, right? So, you know, for without
Mm.
power, well, we've been resilient without power, right? We've learned to live without power. Power, uh, Power not being available will not cause chaos in the country. It has never caused
Yeah,
chaos.
yeah.
We complain and grumble about it. It does not
Mm.
grind down. It does not ground down business activity
The
or prevent
economy,
the
yeah,
government
I get
from
that.
functioning,
Yeah.
right? It will not
Mm.
lead to riots in the street, right?
True,
So
true, true.
in Europe or in North America, power for, let's say a malicious actor takes out power for a few days, it's chaos. They will not know how to function, right? I have a book behind me called Blackout from Mark Ellsberg that, it's a fiction, right? That talks about some threat actors taking down the power grid in Europe. After a
Mm-hmm.
couple of days, there were riots in the streets. People were even looking to take down the government. There were coup in some other countries. So just think about it like
It's
that, right? So
serious. Okay, so
yeah,
that's critical. That's critical.
yeah.
I
So it's not like
agree. I agree.
we're a bit behind, right? Our economy is not really industrialized, and we're just focused on information asset. That's where we are.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. So now moving to operational technology now. So, what are the trends? How are advanced economies, how are they approaching operational technology? What are like the advancements in operational technology, especially from a digitalization perspective? And then let's now narrow down to Nigeria, which is the current realities, the gaps, and the unique challenges. Why do we
Yeah.
struggle? Mm.
Well, so first of all, we need to understand the difference between operational technology and IT, information technology, right? Information technology
Mhm.
is all about the bits and the bytes, the digits, right? Information assets. Operational technology is different, right? It's about controlling and monitoring physical processes, right? With physical devices. So when it comes to operational technology, the philosophy or the paradigm around security essentially, uh, it has always been around safety, reliability, and availability, right? Anything you do in an operational technology environment, you need to take into consideration safety, reliability, and availability. Those are the paradigm or the philosophy. In IT, it's the famous, AIC or CIA or whichever way you want to call it, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? But when we talk about OT, confidentiality and integrity actually don't apply. It's more safety, reliability, and availability. Those are the concepts that apply to operational technology. And some of the concepts are very different, right? In IT, we are always updating, upgrading every 2 to 3 years. We are moving from one to the latest. In operational technology, uh, a lot of the technology, they are built in what we call run to failure. So they've been built to be so reliable that they expect to still be in operation for 40 years or more, right? So those are the differences between OT and IT, and that is the challenge that OT has actually faced, right? That we have technology that have been built to run to fail to last 30 to 40 years, and the concept of security has not really been embedded within OT, right? There has always been the notion that people don't understand operational technology. So how can you attack what you don't understand? So security has never been embedded within OT. The practices that you see in IT, patching and vulnerability assessments and stuff like that, traditionally were never part of OT because of the notion that people don't understand OT. So people can attack what they don't understand. But over the past, I would say, 20 years, we've seen a shift in that thought process. And the most famous one, I don't know if some of your audience here, will know about it, started with Stuxnet, right? That was a
Mm.
that was a malicious program that was allegedly developed between the United States government and Israel, used to destroy the centrifuges in Iran. And it's very funny that we are still back
Mm.
to Iran, but
And we're still battling
we're
with
talking
it.
about
Yes.
nuclear weapon.
Yes.
But
Mm.
the very first OT malicious code that was allegedly developed between US and Israel to attack the centrifuges in I think either Isfahan or the Natanz enrichment facility in Iran.
Right.
And that was the very first concept that OT infrastructure could be attacked by malicious code. So that has changed the paradigm in the OT industry. And we've been seeing a lot of investment in security to protect OT infrastructure over the years.
So, so, but to an extent,
Yeah.
maybe enterprise IT security measures should still be able to protect OT. So why is there that shortfall? So why is that? How come traditional IT security approaches just fall short when it comes to OT?
Because
Is there
OT
is
and
there a
IT,
way? So is there a way I can enhance existing investment in traditional IT security instead of investing or moving over to operational technology security?
so OT and IT, they're different, right? OT is engineering, full engineering
Mm.
of cyber physical systems, right? They have devices, they have a lot of devices to run physical processes. So the way you do things in IT does not actually scale to OT, right? There are parallels. There are things we could take from enterprise IT to OT, but we cannot apply them wholesale, right? The way we do vulnerability and patch management in IT right now, it's impossible, right? In OT.
Mhm.
You with cloud SaaS solution and stuff like that, you could do patch management immediately, right, without even affecting your production systems. But that's not how it is in OT. In OT, you actually need to wait for what we call a maintenance window, right? Then so many of
Mm.
those devices are so old that you don't even want to touch them, right? So there are things that you cannot take things from enterprise IT and apply them directly in OT. You need to understand that they are separate environment, but there are still philosophies from enterprise IT that we apply to OT. One of the core concepts when it comes to defense in OT is network segmentation, right? We've been doing that in enterprise IT for many years, and we're starting to apply the same concept to OT, right? So you need to understand some things, and that's one of the challenges we usually face when we have someone coming from an enterprise IT system to an OT role, right? And you want to start applying principles and the way things are done in
Mm.
enterprise IT to
Yeah.
OT.
Yeah.
You will face a lot of challenges from the folks you meet there, right? So, in fact,
Mm.
it's one of the culture shock, right? When someone transitions from IT to OT and you want to start
Okay.
applying those principles and you get a lot of pushback, right? So, yeah.
Okay. So now going back to critical, infrastructure protection. Um, Not all critical infrastructures are built on OT, right? So
Yes.
where does
Yeah.
IT OT play when it comes to critical infrastructure and critical infrastructure protection?
Yeah. So not so one of the things when I define what different countries or continents define as critical infrastructure, I fail to highlight is that some of them have also identified industries that fall under critical infrastructure. Right. So
Mm.
in Canada, we have 10 industries that are classified as critical infrastructure. In
Mm.
US, it's 16. And when I checked the Cybercrime Act of 2015 in Nigeria, I think we have 15 sectors that have been categorized as critical infrastructure industry, right? So I'll use the
Mm.
example of Canada. We have health, energy, food, transportation, safety, utility as ICT as critical infrastructure industries. So if you look at like this 10 in Canada, um, most of them are built on OT, apart from ICT and banking and finance, right? So if you take out
Mm.
that 10 categories, eight out of them will have an IT and OT as part of what
Mm.
is required for the business. Uh, when we talk about ICT and banking and finance, they run purely on IT.
Mm.
So not every critical infrastructure industry actually runs on OT, right? It depends on where you are. Mostly banking, finance, and ICT does not
Yeah.
run on OT.
On
Yeah.
OT. Okay. Okay. So talking about it, I think for Nigeria,
Yeah.
our telecom sector falls on that critical national infrastructure. Like
They
there's a lot
should
that
they
there's a
should
lot that
fall
won't
under.
work.
Yeah.
There's a lot that won't work if our telecom providers, social media content makers, a lot of things will go bad, I'm sure.
No, you've not
We
even
do a
thought
lot of
of payment.
ordering, buying, huh?
Payment.
Payments, e-commerce.
Yeah.
That is most likely the most critical national infrastructure in Nigeria, the telecoms, our telecom
Yeah.
providers.
Well, no, I'll argue that if you look at the category in Nigeria, we have 15, right? But a lot of those 15, ordinary Nigerians can't relate to them, right? Mines and
Mm-hmm.
steel, education, public, most Nigerians can relate to them. But the ones
Mm.
that I think we can relate to that will lead to disorder if something happens to take them down in the country will be telecommunication, first of all, the
Mm-hmm.
banking and financial services, and I
Okay,
will
so
say to an extent, energy, especially upstream, right? If something happens to the upstream, oil and gas providers, right? And we
mm,
cannot, pump out crude oil and sell it. Obviously, it's going to affect the government, right, in terms of revenue.
yeah,
So I would say
absolutely.
that the critical infrastructure industry in Nigeria that have the potential if something malicious were to happen to them that will
Mm.
affect the society, the effective function of the society will be
Of the society at
telecommunication,
large.
banking and finance, and energy, the upstream. And maybe the downstream as well, right? We all know the effect of, fuel scarcity and, fuel queues. But the downstream in Nigeria does not particularly make use of technology, right? It's just, taking fuel from what do you call them? Those, warehouse through the tankers to the gas station. So it doesn't
The more
particularly.
transportation logistics.
Yeah, right. So it doesn't particularly, but yeah, if we all know the effect of fuel scarcity, right, in the country. So
Mm.
I would say we probably have three industries uh, that if we have malicious actors target them and cause some kind of damages, will affect effective functioning of the Nigerian society.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move to cybersecurity proper. I'm sure we'll probably still come back. So now the evolving threat landscape. What's your opinion of the threat landscape today? We can look at it moving from last year, happenings from last year, moving into this year, and how things have happened rapidly, especially in this region, in this part of the world. We've been waiting for this time. When are we going to be that relevant to start getting a lot of attacks? And it's quite exciting that for me, it's quite exciting that we're getting that attention. I hope people won't come for me, but hey, I think it's a good time for us. So tell us about the evolving threat landscape from your own perspective,
Yeah.
growing cyber risks facing critical infrastructure sectors too. So the landscape and then cyber risk facing critical infrastructure sectors.
So the landscape, if you look at it globally, over the past couple of years, um, now over the past few years globally, due to the geopolitical tension going around the world, right? So we have the Ukraine and Russia conflict going on, and people have taken, different sides, right? Some people have taken sides with Ukraine, some few have taken sides with Russia. Uh, we have the U.S., Israel, Iran, conflicts since last year. So what we've seen globally is that we've seen a whole lot of nation-state actors, right, targeting critical infrastructure of countries on the opposite side of the divide that they support, right. We've seen Russian aligned threat actors targeting countries in North America and Europe that supports Russia, targeting their critical infrastructure, such as their water management system, their utility, trying to, take those infrastructure down. And we've also seen the same with threat actors aligned with Iran, targeting water and water waste management systems in North America, specifically the US and Canada. And as of I think last month, they were also targeting some specific PLCs from a vendor, Rockwell, that happened to be online. So that is what we've seen. We have seen increasing activities from nation state actors. Now we also continue to see activities from criminal groups, right? The ransomware epidemic hasn't lessened at all. We still
Mm-hmm.
continue to see different threat actors, right? Now where we now have the triple threats in terms of data exfiltration, exposure of the data, and ransomware, right? So those are the kind of activities we've seen over the past few years. We've also seen a bit of the activists, right? Those supporting climate initiatives as well, targeting specific countries, especially the US government and that. So globally, those are the kind of activities we've been seeing, and those are the three kind of separate threat actors that we've observed over the past few years. Locally in Nigeria, I think it's a different scenario. one of the issues in Nigeria is that issue of disclosure, right? We tend to hear this thing in the dark web and in the grapevine, right? It's not something that is disclosed, but the target has mainly been the financial sector, the banking and the fintechs that we've seen, and I think that area or those industries primarily driven by the criminal group kind of threat actor, which is very, very interesting because I used to think that even when I came here, I thought that the cybersecurity posture of the Nigerian banks in particular was very matured compared to what I met here because we've had programs that have been mandated by the CBN, like PCI DSS, ISO 27001, almost more than 10 years ago, right? That led
Yeah.
to a lot of investments in the banking and finance
Mm-hmm.
sector in their cybersecurity program and creating a program to protect their organization. So I used to always say, look, based on what I know and the investment that I'd seen before I left, that Nigerian banks, their cybersecurity posture was better than what I saw here when I came here. So it's particularly disheartening for me to see some of the
Mm.
activities targeting organizations in the financial institution in Nigeria.
Mm.
I don't know what has happened, but I know when I was around, there was a lot of investment, not just in tools, but in building teams that can, run an effective cybersecurity program in Nigeria and financial institutions.
All right, thanks for that. So when you mentioned ransomware, I wanted you to like talk more on it. So, traditionally, how we used to know ransomware was, the system, an organization gets hit, and yeah, you don't have access to your systems, and then you need to pay a ransom, and then your system gets released. Well, it looks like it's taking a different dimension now, especially from a disclosure perspective and more. So, can you talk more about that? Then I also wanted you to talk about um, why do you think we're struggling with disclosure in this region? And maybe give us an example of what disclosure looks like, in your own environment in Canada today.
Yeah. So first of all, when we look at that ransomware, right? Typically it's always been the fact that like you described, right? Like, you log onto your system, you get a message asking you to pay particular, your systems have been ransomed, pay a particular amount to get the keys to, decrypt the data, right? But as organizations have improved their cybersecurity posture, especially their backup, moving to immutable backup, right, and being able to, restore within a reasonable amount of time backup from their immutable backup. We've seen
Mhm.
the tactics from the threat actor also evolve, right?
Mm.
Where they're now looking at,
Mm.
data exfiltration, right?
Mm.
Where they exfiltrate the data. And the ransom is now we are going to expose this data if you
Yeah,
do not pay ransom. That
yeah,
tactic has come about because we've seen a lot of organizations move to immutable backup, right? So if
right,
they ransom
right.
the data, we should be able to restore the data back once we've contained and sanitized the environment, right? You know, but the reason why they are now moving to the exfiltration of data is mostly for two reasons. From a regulatory perspective, right? We have GDPR, NIS, and stuff like that. And also, I think uh, from a reputation perspective, right? You don't want to be known as the organization whose data is out there in the dark web that has been published, right? So we've seen threat actors evolve their tactics from moving to just ransoming your data to now exfiltrating it and threatening to publish and expose it, right? So we're going to get more of that, right?
Mm.
And it's
Mm.
been driven by reputational damage and
Mm.
regulatory, sanctions, right? So that's
Mm,
what's primarily driving those those aspects of the involvement of ransomware as
okay.
in yeah. Sorry, the second part of that question, can you repeat it?
So before we get to the second part, I also want to just quickly compare. So it's, it feels like a mix because especially for the ones we experienced in Nigeria recently, I kept getting questions from people that, so wow, but why did the guy publish it? Like why? And for me, I would share about activism a bit. Like,
Hmm.
do decides to be a hero and expose agencies or organizations with weak security controls, and it's a bit of an awareness. So, is there a thin line between I wanted pay, they didn't pay me, or you know what, I would expose anyway from an activist perspective?
Well, I think it was driven purely by criminal,
Mm,
by criminal greed. I did read his interview, and to be honest,
mm.
it wasn't driven by any activism or the need
Right,
to help our Nigerian organization improve their cybersecurity
mm,
posture. I look at it
right.
from purely criminal, right? And from
Mm,
as a criminal, right? If
mm.
you threaten someone and you don't follow up on that threat, right, then other organizations will simply call your bluff, right?
So
So,
okay, so I get your
yes.
point on the reputation. So it's more of the hacker's reputation. Hey,
Oh, yeah,
you
yeah,
are known
right.
not to publish. So
The
okay,
hacker's
I get it.
reputation, right? If they call your bluff and you don't publish it, then
Then
you're
everybody keeps calling it.
yeah,
Okay,
everybody will keep calling your bluff, right? And the
okay.
way this thing works, right? It's not just one person. Uh, you, stuff like this, they're actually groups of people that have come together, right? They have, they have job descriptions, they have, different stuff that different people do, right? So it's not just an individual. The person behind the recent one in Nigeria, might probably be front person, but I'm sure he or she is
But it's working with it. Yeah, so it's working with a team. It's working with a
working with
team.
it, yeah, working with a team, right? So your reputation also comes into as an as a threat actor. Your reputation is also at
Mm,
stake if you do not follow up on what you threatened or promised to do, right?
mm.
So yeah, I
Fem,
don't think it was
Femi,
driven by
mm.
it.
No, no,
It's
I was going to say Femi in the chat says shiny hunters.
Oh, yeah, that's the name of the threat. Yeah, right. So I don't think his was driven by the need or the desire to help us improve the cybersecurity posture of organizations in the country by exposing that it's purely financially motivated.
Interesting. So the second question I asked then, the next question was around disclosure that why do you think we struggle? Why do you think we struggle in this region with disclosure? And maybe give us examples or use cases where disclosure happens well, in your region currently, or
So
globally. Mm,
I think we struggle with disclosure because it's a cultural thing. Nobody likes to talk about bad news, right? Especially if it affects you, right?
mm,
I think that's why we struggle. And also, from a regulatory perspective, right? Maybe some of these things aren't strong enough. We have the NDPR, right? Some of this they mandate disclosure, and I'm not sure what the sanctions are if you do not disclose to the regulatory authorities. So maybe some of those
mm,
are weak in our part of the world, right? That's why
mm,
we don't get to organizations don't get to disclose this or disclose this in a timely manner. Unlike in this part of the world, right? Regulations are things people comply with. They don't play with it, right? So
yeah.
where there is a regulatory requirement to disclose to the regulator and to your customers here, people follow through. All right, they don't
Mm,
try to play around or beat around it. So I think it's a culture. It's first of all, it's a culture thing. Then also
mhm.
the fact that maybe from a regulatory perspective, enforcement might be a bit weak on our side of the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well said, well said.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to OT, ICS. So I would like you to talk about, especially for some of us, it would be more of some level of enlightenment or awareness on the common vulnerabilities for industrial control systems and OT environments. So what are those common vulnerabilities that you've
Yeah.
experienced or that are on the
So,
landscape now today?
so this is the interesting part, right? When we don't talk about vulnerabilities, right, you are looking at the CVSS score, the impact, and all of those, right, in IT.
Yeah,
That's not how we look at it from an OT perspective, right? The interesting thing is this. When I mentioned Stuxnet at the beginning, right, Stuxnet is the first malicious code that targeted operational technology, infrastructure, and assets, and till to which is almost almost 20, maybe 18 years ago or so. From then till now, we've only had 8 detected purpose-built OT malicious code, right? So it's not something that happens a lot where something a malicious code has been developed and released into an OT environment and has caused damage. We've only had 8 so far, right? Which goes
mm,
to tell you that yes, we do have vulnerabilities in AOT, old firmware, insecure configuration, network that's not properly segregated, right? But we don't have them being exploited all the time like we have in IT, right?
yeah.
We do have 0-day vulnerability, but to exploit them in OT requires some sort of technical knowledge and skill set to be able to do that, right? So, but if you want to look at what are the vulnerabilities that are in OT, legacy operating system, unsupported
Yeah.
software and applications, right?
Mm,
Um, Insecure configuration. In OT, you will find devices that have been deployed out of the box like that, right? Without even changing the default
default
password that
credentials,
comes with
yeah.
the devices, right? So those are some of those vulnerabilities we see. Uh, Improper network segmentation or segregation. So those
Mm,
are things that we see in OT.
Okay, so it makes sense. So that means so you won't be getting compared to IT all the real world patterns that are evolving weekly, almost daily now, and then managing the attackers or exploitation of these gaps is not as easy as that for whoever is even profitable for them. You get if they get through eventually.
Yeah.
So
So which is why most of the OT attacks we have experienced so far, most of them can be linked to nation state actors. They are the ones
yeah.
that have the technical capacity and the resources to be able
Mm,
to do that. So that's what we've
oh,
seen. And
mm,
traditionally, most apart from the Stuxnet one, where they breached an air gap facility, right,
mhm,
using allegedly using a USB stick. Uh,
mhm,
Most of the other OT related attacks we've seen, they've actually come in through IT, right? Where the threat actors they've breached the IT side, and from
IT
IT
side
they're
and
now
they get
trying
into the
to
system.
get into the OT side, right? So from an OT perspective, IT is always a big weakness because it's rare, and like I say, Stuxnet is the only one where we've seen um, a successful attack against OT that jumped the air gap
Mm,
directly into OT without coming
mm,
through an IT, right? So
mm.
most of the attacks
So,
are one of the most famous ones from a few years ago is a Colonial Pipeline in the
yeah.
US, right?
Mhm,
It was also the breach happened on the IT side and they were targeting the OT. They never got into OT, but as part of their incident response, they shut down on their OT side out of an abundance of caution, right? So that's what we've always seen. The vulnerabilities within OT, they are known, right? Uh, but it actually takes get from IT to OT to be able to breach OT. And from an OT perspective, IT is a weak is a weakness, is a weak point.
IT is the weak link for the OT
Yeah,
system. Okay. So, so talking about bridging the gap now. So bridging the gap
yeah.
from risk to resilience. So what's your take? What are those practical strategies for strengthening OT security? So obviously from some of the things you said, legacy systems, legacy operating systems, components not being upgraded, patching difficult. So what are the practical strategies that can help strengthen operational technology security?
One of the first one that's you know the ISA IEC advises is segregation. First of all, you need to actually properly segregate IT from OT, right? That's the one. I've been to organizations where the network is flat. IT and OT networks they're on the same network, right? So if someone happened to breach the IT side, then they are already on the OT and they can attack physical process or control physical processes. So the first one we always preach is effective network segmentation between IT and OT, right? Then we also talk about segmenting the OT itself, right? There is this thing called the PODI model or the PODI Enterprise Reference Architecture in OT that speaks to how you segment the different levels of OT. OT is not just one big network or one big layer. It actually has different levels, right? In PODI model, we talk about from level 0 which is at the field devices, to level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 3.5, right? So in OT, it's always advisable that after you've segregated IT and OT, you've created, that boundary between them. You also segregate your OT network into those different levels as advised in the Purdue Enterprise Reference Architecture, using OT aware firewall. So an effective segregation, it's one of the best form of defenses that you can have when it comes to OT. Then after that, we talk about OT monitoring or asset inventory, right? So like you monitor on the IT side, by configuring your systems and applications to send their logs and events to, a monitoring solution. We also have purpose-built OT network monitoring solution that you can deploy onto your network that will give you visibility into your asset. One of the funniest things you'll find in OT is when you go to an organization or you go to an OT environment and you ask for asset inventory, most people they don't know what's on the network when it comes to OT, right? So, by implementing an OT network monitoring solution that gives you visibility into the asset on the network, and it can detect threats and vulnerabilities and configuration changes, right? So that helps improve your OT cybersecurity posture. And then one of the other things that most organizations lack when it comes to OT cybersecurity is policies, processes, and procedures, right? We have IT security policy, but most organizations they don't have security policies adapted towards OT. They don't even have
Mm,
defined processes and procedures on how you do things, right? So,
mm,
if you take those three, effective segregation of IT and OT, appropriate segregation of the OT level itself, deploying an OT network monitoring solution, and developing OT specific policies, processes, and procedures. Those are the foundation of any OT security program.
yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. As you were saying, everything just still aligns with IT in my head. Hey, just do everything you do for the same people.
Oh no, no, you,
Yeah,
you, you can't. So we always have this clash, right? In between OT and IT. And I'm gonna take you back. I don't know if you remember this. We worked together at Altec West Africa, right?
yeah, yeah,
And which was actually my first OT related job. And if you can recall, the plant production manager and the operation supervisor, I don't know if you can recall, we used to have a lot of issues with
the
them
tall
because we
guy,
wanted,
the tall light guy, and then the Niger guy.
yeah, yeah, because
I
we
know, I
wanted them
remember.
to do things according to IT, and it was always a clash, right?
There was
They
always,
don't have
yeah, there's always a
domains,
clash.
they don't have password policies and stuff like that. And when we came on board,
Mm.
we wanted to implement some of them, and it was like, no, we don't do this in an OT environment. So,
Yeah, access control management and all that.
yeah, so there's always
Yeah,
that clash when
I
you,
start
if
from
you,
uh,
sorry, yeah, if you
Sorry, go
come
ahead. I think someone. Mm.
Okay, if you come with an IT mindset, like this is how we do things in enterprise IT, and you bring that to OT, you're going to have a lot of pushback and clash. In fact, you are most likely to fail if you come with that mentality, right? Because you get pushback from the operations and the production folks that no, this is not IT. We don't do things this way. So that's one of the pitfalls to avoid for anybody trying to transition from IT to OT cybersecurity, right? You need to understand the philosophy behind OT, and you don't try to apply IT principles to OT. You will get pushback from the people you meet over there.
All right, nice, nice, nice. Thanks for that. So, coming back to critical infrastructure, what can you tell us about best practices for cyber resilience for critical infrastructure? I believe for critical infrastructure, it becomes more critical as they go,
Yeah.
especially maybe as the public, continues to utilize the service, especially different ways, multiple channels. So, what are best practices for building cyber resilience for critical infrastructure?
Well, the interesting thing is this resilience is part of OT when we build an OT infrastructure. Because I mentioned the philosophies, from an OT perspective, when you talk about cyber, safety, reliability, and availability. So from that reliability aspect is related to resilience, right? A lot of OT infrastructure, they are built in a way that they have high availability and redundancy. In fact, in OT, we usually have two sides. It's called a side A and a side B, right? So we have two network A, network B, right? So processes will run on one network, and when there is a maintenance window, they need to do maintenance. They fail over from side A or network A to side B or network B while they do maintenance on the other side. So most OT infrastructure that support OT infrastructure, they usually have resilience built into them, right? Where things go missing is incorporating cyber into that
Okay.
resilience, right? A lot of them don't have things such as immutable backup, right? They don't even
Mm,
test backup, right?
mm,
So those
mm,
are ways we can include resilience into OT, right? By ensuring we have things such as your backup, being immutable. You defined your recovery time objective, your recovery point objective. We do test recovery on a regular basis. We do tabletop exercise. We do incident response, right? Those are the things we can do to include resilience as part of OT cybersecurity.
okay. So I like this next point. It says, how do you align, or where do you see an alignment between security and operational continuity? Where's the alignment? How do you align
Uh,
it?
that's an interesting one, right? So there is an alignment, and it's actually a direct alignment. So operational continuity is what most people in OT think about, right? Because you don't want to have a downtime
Mm,
of your machines, your processes, and your system, right? A downtime, costs you revenue. Just think about it. A refinery, let's take a Dangote refinery, right? If they have something impact their crude processing and they are not able to refine crude in a day, they can tell you what that will be in loss of revenue, right? So operational continuity is very, very important to operational technology, right? Because of the direct impact to it. This is where security is directly tied to it. Security can and may impact operational continuity, right? Wherever I
mm,
have a security instance that takes down, right, process or process safety, then we will not have a continuity of operations.
Mm,
right? So
mm,
there is a
okay.
direct tie between them. While from the OT side, they might not see it from that perspective, right? But we do know that a security incident that leads to a downtime will impact the revenue for that particular organization. So there is actually a direct tie.
Good. So no, while you were saying this, something just came to mind. And while you also were talking about OT and operational technology, and fine, it's not necessarily limited to industrial environments alone, but we were looking at in Nigeria. And I know someone had mentioned, was it Femi O that mentioned that even banks, some fintechs leverage OT. And what just it took me back to back in the days into Switch where we used to do FT Stratos, fault tolerance systems. And
Yeah.
the main goal was for uptime. Well, the mantra then was 99.999, and
Mm,
it aligns with operational continuity. It had multiple components, which
yeah.
speaks to resilience of the infrastructure. So payment companies probably, would you say that falls under operational technology, sort of? Because
No,
even
it
the
does not.
the
It
firmware,
does not.
the operating system sitting on
It,
those servers then were not the average Windows server 2003 back in the days.
yeah,
It was
but
like
that does not fall
embedded.
under Gartner's definition of operational technology.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Those are purely.
I was just trying to wing it to see whether we still qualify
No. Ghana have a definition for what constitutes
Okay.
operational technology, right? So
All right,
what you
cool.
find are
Okay.
purely IT systems. But yeah,
Okay.
and OT we see the same thing. Some vendors have what we call like a fault tolerant network that they design, right? So that's what I
Mm,
mentioned, the side A and the side B. They've designed it to be fault tolerant, right? Rockwell has
mm,
something called Rockwell fault tolerant Ethernet network, right? That they've designed
mm,
it that if so that we continue to have operational continuity. If something happens to the side A, we'll just move entirely to the side B. It's like in IT
real
having
time.
two sites, your backup site and your main production site. And in the event of a
Mm.
disaster, you just flip to your DR site.
The same thing too now. In these days, we have active active. We call it active active. You
Yeah,
move from
yeah,
active
but
to active.
your active is at the component level. We're talking about at a network
Okay.
level.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's everything, right? On this network, everything that you have is called a side A. All the processes and all the infrastructure. You have another one on called a side B, so that if something fails,
Okay.
not
Okay.
just a component fails on it, you can switch the entire network, right? So that's how
Mm,
they manage resiliency in most operational
okay.
technology environment. But like I said, cyber is not actually embedded into that.
Right.
It's mostly from an
Right.
operational
Nice.
perspective.
Right. You sure I don't want us to win in this OTE implementation in Nigeria? Okay.
Well,
So
no,
then,
there are opportunities. To be honest,
mm,
I think about all the discos, right? I wonder what they are doing in terms of operational technology.
right.
Look at the Dangote refinery. Very soon, I'm sure it's going to be designated as a critical national information infrastructure, right? Because if it goes
Mm,
down, the impact to the country is going to be massive. The discos,
mm,
well, we've been living without electricity for a while, but that doesn't still mean we cannot improve the cybersecurity posture of the operational technology environment.
True that. True that. Okay, so what we'll be winding down now. So in closing out, we want to look at the future of critical infrastructure protection in an evolving threat landscape. What does the future look like? You know, based on from your own experience and what you're working with.
Yeah, from my own experience, critical infrastructure is going to be getting more targeted, right? We're going to see scenarios where nation state actors that have the capacity and the capability to attack critical infrastructure at scale start probably releasing some of their capabilities to known criminals or associates. So what we're going to see over the next few years, we'll see more targeted attacks toward critical infrastructure. I will say out there in the Western world, right? And we're
Mhm.
gonna see we already have frameworks like ISA 62443 that organizations
Mhm.
in that space can adopt. But
Mhm.
there has been nothing compelling them to do that. So by the time we get to where we are commoditizing um, OT payloads, OT malicious
Mm.
codes from uh, nation state threat actors to criminal groups, I think we will see a situation where organizations are assessing themselves against the ISA 62443 framework and starting to, adopt and implement that framework. Right, that's where I see this in terms of protection of critical infrastructure. That's where I see it's evolving to, where organizations have adopted that framework and are implementing it, similar to where you see organizations adopt and implement NIST, CSF, or ISO 27001 as the basis of their cybersecurity program.
All right. And so before you go, before we take questions,
Sure.
so I would just like you to talk about the happenings in Nigeria now from a cybersecurity perspective, what you think organizations should be doing, or what the authorities should be doing from a policy perspective. Why? Because, I think we've got to a point where, like it was announced, there was supposed to be a committee set up, things done. And in our own little ways, there are things we're doing. Like, for example, at eCentry, we are running this program called the Startup Bouquet for startups. So, and it's easier to manage from the start, which is the thinking. But the issue today now is for enterprises and established organizations struggling to now integrate cybersecurity into their operations. Of course, as usual, an afterthought and the challenges they're having. So, what would you advise? What would you recommend is the way forward for organizations, mature operations, and would fall, I won't say they are prey because they are the ones that have the vulnerabilities and the gaps, but
Yeah.
that would be victims of possible attacks in the future.
So I'd say this, and it's something we've been saying for many years, right? That there's a whole lot of difference between compliance and security, right? Just because you've
Mm,
been compliant with a particular standard or framework does not mean your
mm,
cybersecurity posture, right, is secure, right? When I think about the events of the past few months, it seems to me that organizations are falling back into that state of compliance checkbox as opposed to
mm,
having an active cybersecurity program, right? So I think we need to go back to that, right, where we have an active cybersecurity program, right, and there are things that we can manage or leverage. Yeah, right. So knowledge is not, knowledge does not have to be in-house alone, right? I think one of the challenges is the fact that some of these consulting companies out there that can provide advisory services, they are actually very, very expensive, right? And we've seen the adoption of the VCISO model here, right, where
mm,
organizations can get fractional CISO advisory and stuff like that. I think I would like to see more adoption of that, right?
mm,
Especially for the smaller organizations as well, right? Where you don't need big bucks to be able to get quality CISO advice. There are
mm,
organizations that will be able to provide those fractional CISO as part of the CISO service, right? So that's one of those things I would like to see them adopt. I also like the idea of what eCentry is doing with that startup bouquet, right? A lot of organizations, smaller ones, probably think we don't need cybersecurity because they think cybersecurity is for the big ones, but that's not so.
expensive. Mm,
It's expensive, right? So with something like that, I think you might be able to start pushing the culture of cybersecurity to small and mid-sized organizations as well. Then one of those other things I think we need to do is we need to have information sharing and analysis center, right? I don't know
mm,
what the financial institutions are doing, but we need to come to the point where an attack on one is an attack on all of us, right? And if
oh,
one
yeah.
organization is facing an attack, they can take that information and share it through an ISAC to the other institutions, and those ones can use those informations, to take defensible formations, right? So that's something I would love to see, us adopt as well. Create financial institution ISACs, right, where you can share information in a responsible way, and others can use it, like a form of inoculation to take those information from there to, protect their own organization as well. Right. So, but most of all, I think I'll go back to my first message. It seems we are falling back to compliance and checkbox, and we need to move away from there to active cybersecurity program. You're on mute. You're still on mute. Uh, Brother, you're on mute if you can hear me. Oh.
All right, thank you very much, Bolabo and Wola. It was a very insightful session, and we're coming close to the end of the session. So we'll be taking much more questions now. So if we have questions, please kindly drop them in the chat so we can take your questions right about now. So I think a question here that we've answered during the session was, would you class smart devices, embedded system as an OT?
Those are a subcategory, I would say. And some will even argue that a different category themselves. Those are what we call IoT, more like Internet of Things, not operational technology. Yeah, so there is a distinct difference between operational technology and Internet of Things. Those kind of smart devices are Internet of Things.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that answers the person's question. We need more questions coming in so we can round up the session. So I don't think there are more questions coming in. So I think this will bring the session to a close, sorry. And I want to say a very big thank you to our guest speaker, Wala. We learned so much from this session. It was a very insightful session, and we hope to see more of you. Have more of you at this century. And also, a thank you to our CBO Olabo for anchoring this session. Right in the chat, you would see social media handles to follow us, and also to access some of our managed security services. You can visit our website and also register to attend our onboarding session, startup security bouquet onboarding session happening this Friday, and another coming up in next 2 weeks Friday. So you can onboard, get to know what your business or your organization needs, where you're having a security gap, and how to address them. So this will bring the session to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And the recording of this session will be shared via emails to everyone. Do have a good day, everybody. Bye.
So,